The Death Spectres. The Death Spectres are a successor chapter of the Raven Guard Legion created during the 13th Founding, nicknamed the Dark Founding. Foundings are the rare officially sanctioned events through which new Space Marine chapters are brought into existence, and the 13th is considered particularly mysterious. Less is documented about it than any other founding in history. The Death Spectres are one of only 2 chapters confirmed to have come from it, the other being the Exorcists. The Death Spectres wear black armor with bone-white helmets. Their badge is a bone-white skull over crossed black scythes on a white background. Like their predecessors, the Raven Guard, the Death Spectres carry a mutation in their gene seed, the biological material used to create Space Marines, that affects pigmentation. Every member of the chapter develops albino white skin and hair, along with glowing blood red eyes. The Death Spectres broadly follow the Codex Astartes, the standard rulebook governing how Space Marine chapters are organized and operate. But their culture incorporates unique titles and roles drawn from the language of their homeworld, Occludus. The chapter master is called the Megir, the chief librarian is the Messazar, and the master of the flag is the Megron, and the chapter council is known as the Menrahir. They also have a mysterious command squad role called the Terrorblade, the nature of which is not well understood by outsiders. Their elite first company, called the Wargeists, stand out for their signature weapon, the Power Scythe. The Death Spectre's psychic warrior librarians are also called the Order, and it is unusually powerful even by Space Marine standards, both in size and influence. The Messazar holds authority over the entire chapter when the Megir is absent. Some accounts suggest the Megir himself may be a psyker as well. The Order places a particular focus on reading fate and time. The Messazar is said to be capable of embedding prophetic messages into the future itself, allowing the chapter to act when specific events come to pass and even extend psychic aid across time. Becoming a Death Spectre librarian is an extraordinarily dangerous process built around surviving multiple ritual deaths. The first occurs in childhood when an aspirant is injected with lethal toxin and must revive on their own. The second comes after the surgical implantation that creates a Space Marine, during which the aspirant experiences death for hours. A potential third death awaits those seeking promotion to the rank of Codicil, a higher librarian grade. These trials are bound up in the chapter's belief in the Black River, a spiritual and psychic vision of fate and time. Aspirants thrown into it are battered by its currents and threatened by predatory entities resembling demons. Survival is rare, and those who endure it are considered to have proven their psychic strength in one of the most grueling tests the chapter can offer. The Death Spectre's method of finding new recruits is distinctly unsettling. On the orders of the Megir, the chapter seeks out human colonies on the fringes of the Imperium and selects women they consider the strongest genetic candidates. These women are taken to a dedicated world near the homeworld where they are expected to breed and raise sons who may one day prove worthy of becoming initiates. The Death Spectres hold death at the center of their beliefs, approaching it with solemn reverence. They believe that only those who die in battle will be reborn, and they deeply honor those who fall in the Emperor's service. When a fallen battle brother's body can be recovered, it is brought back to their fortress monastery on their homeworld, mummified and laid to rest in its catacombs. The chapter members also find genuine comfort among the quiet graveyards and tomb cities of their homeworld. Angels Vermillion. The Angels Vermillion are a chapter descended from the Blood Angels. They were created during the Second Founding, the first major wave of new chapters established after the original legions were broken up, and their homeworld, Coronal, sits on the eastern fringes of the galaxy. Like the Blood Angels, they are only partially compliant with the Codex Astartes, following their ancestors' organizational structure rather than the standard template. The Blood Angels and their successors carry a genetic curse with 2 dimensions: the Red Thirst, a vampiric craving for blood, and the Black Rage, a descending madness that eventually consumes them entirely. The Angels Vermillion discovered early on that allowing themselves to indulge the Red Thirst rather than suppress it gave them greater control over their genetic curse and pushed back the onset of the Black Rage by decades. Ashamed of this curse from the very beginning, they withdrew from the wider Space Marine community and dedicated themselves to wars of penitence, fighting obscure, thankless battles that nonetheless helped preserve humanity. Their view of Sanguinius, the Primarch and founding father of the Blood Angels lineage, is darker than most. Where the Blood Angels remember him with reverence and grief, the Angels Vermillion see him as a cursed figure whose death condemned all his sons. They have fully accepted that they are monsters rather than the noble warriors their angelic imagery might suggest, but they believe that in a galaxy full of far worse horrors, embracing what they are is worth it if it keeps humanity alive a little longer. Every 50 years, the Angels Vermillion perform a ritual called the Sorrowing, designed to hold their red thirst in check. Civilians from their homeworld and chapter serfs, the ordinary humans who serve the chapter, are brought in and drained of their blood for this ritual. The Angels Vermillion chapter members then bathe in the collected blood as part of the ceremony. The ritual culminates with a priest opening his own veins and bleeding to death, his blood mingling with the rest. This final act is believed to add the essence of Sanguinius to the collected blood. It is then processed and stored in the dispensers of the chapter's power armor to be used as sustenance during battle. The Angels Vermillion do not take pleasure in any of this. They approach the sorrowing as a tragic obligation, a burden they bear because they believe it is necessary for humanity's survival. The dead are treated with genuine respect and solemnity throughout. The Blood Drinkers. The Blood Drinkers are a Blood Angels successor chapter created during the Second Founding. Like all Blood Angel successors, they carry the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. The Red Thirst strikes them with particular intensity, manifesting as an overwhelming compulsion to drink the blood of their enemies. The Blood Drinkers wear red armor with gold and yellow trim on their shoulder plates. Their chapter badge is a black chalice with a single black drop of blood falling into it. Their homeworld is a harsh volcanic world laced with rivers of lava. The planet is essentially a furnace, its extreme conditions making it hostile to almost all life. Despite carrying the same genetic curse as the Blood Angels and their other successor chapters, the Blood Drinkers appear to have found some degree of control over it. They still maintain a death company, which is the group of battle brothers who have succumbed to the Black Rage, but far fewer of their members fall to it compared to other Blood Angel successors. By all outward appearances, they have managed to hold the worst of the curse at bay. The entire foundation of their chapter's rituals and ceremonies revolves around the consumption of blood in large quantities. The Rite of Holos is the Blood Drinkers' central ritual, practiced to manage their red thirst. The chapter's battle brothers gather in a sacred chamber called the Hall of Life, stripped of their rank insignia and dressed in simple ceremonial clothing. Chapter serfs willingly submit to having their blood drained through metal tubes, which flow through channels cut into the stone floor and collect in a large central basin shaped like the chapter's blood drop symbol for the chapter members to drink. The chapter then sacrifices an individual upon an altar in what is known as the Blood Tide. Afterward, the chapter's chief spiritual leader leads the brothers in prayers of atonement and preparation. They reaffirm their oaths to the Emperor, seek forgiveness from one another for the lives taken, and have their weapons and armor anointed with a measure of their own blood by the chapter's tech marines before turning their minds to war. This ritual is what gives the chapter members a much stronger degree of control over the Black Rage. What the chapter does not know is the ritual's dark origin. It was born from a bargain struck with a demon believed to be Kairos Fate Weaver, one of the most powerful servants of Chaos, who gave the ritual to a battle brother named Holos in exchange for the ability to corrupt the visions experienced by a handful of Death Company warriors. The Black Rage typically causes sufferers to relive the death of Sanguinius, but in these altered visions, the demon replaces that imagery with visions of Holos and itself. By the 39th millennium, 18 blood drinkers had received these visions and been tempted with the power of chaos, and while all had refused thus far, Kairos only needs one to accept in order to damn the entire chapter. Space Sharks. When and how the Carcharodons, otherwise known as the Space Sharks, Space Marine chapter was created remains unknown, and while they are believed to be descended from the Raven Guard, this has never been confirmed. Their armor is primarily gray and their emblem is a great white shark, its jaws curved around to meet its tail fin, forming a crescent of teeth against a black background. Their skin is pale and gray, almost corpse-like, and their oldest warriors develop entirely black eyes. The few records that exist about the Carcharodons suggest they live and operate entirely from their fleet of ships. Their ships vary widely in age and design, suggesting the chapter simply uses whatever vessels it can get a hold of, keeping them running through heavy repairs and modifications. This same scavenging approach applies to their weapons and armor, which span thousands of years of history and come from many different sources across the Imperium. Each of the Carcharodons' company commanders, known as Reaper Primes, carries a responsibility beyond leading their soldiers in battle, ensuring the chapter always has a fresh supply of potential recruits. This was typically accomplished through what the chapter calls the Red Tithes. Under a formal decree that sanctions their wandering exile, the Carcharodons are permitted to descend on Imperial worlds and take people from the population by force. The majority of those taken do not become soldiers. Instead, they serve as slaves and laborers aboard the fleet, providing the workforce needed to keep the chapter ships running. A smaller number, those of the right age and disposition, are put through a brutal series of trials to determine if they have what it takes to become Space Marines. Very few survive the process, and even fewer go on to join the chapter's scout company as new initiates. The rate of death during recruitment is even higher than the already punishing standards seen across other Space Marine chapters. When losses grow too severe to replenish through the Red Tithes alone, the Carcharodons turn to a second source of recruits from a renegade brotherhood known as the Ashen Claws. The Ashen Claws are descended from the lineage of the Raven Guard. During the Horus Heresy, they chose to side with neither the Imperium nor the Forces of Chaos, and instead they struck out independently, dealing significant damage to the traitorous Night Lords and their home sector before disappearing entirely from Imperial records. Almost no one knows they still exist, and the Carcharodons are among the rare few who do. The Carcharodons deal with them only as a last resort. When casualties outpace what the Red Tithes can replace, they negotiate with the Ashen Claws, trading weapons and war supplies in exchange for new recruits. Despite thousands of years of isolation from the Imperium, the Carcharodons remain deeply and genuinely loyal to it. Their faith, however, has taken on a distinctly ancient and primal character, shaped by their long exile rather than the more formal religious practices that have developed across the Imperium over time. They worship the Emperor under the name Rangu, and their beliefs are rooted in older, more direct memories of him as a living being. They also hold to the belief that their Primarch will one day return, and that only when he does will their exile finally end. The Flesh Terrors. The Flesh Terrors are another Space Marine chapter descended from the Blood Angels. They were created during the Second Founding, and they are the smallest among the group of Blood Angel successor chapters, collectively known as the Sanguinary Brotherhood. Maroon covers the torso, arms, and legs of their armor, while the helmet, shoulder guards, and backpack are jet black. They broadly follow the same tactical structure as the Blood Angels, but lean even more heavily into close quarters combat. Their homeworld is a savage jungle world, overrun with enormous reptilian predators. Life there shapes their culture profoundly. Those who wish to become Space Marines must first hunt these creatures as a rite of passage, and the constant brutality of survival on such a world reinforces the savagery already in their blood. The Flesh Terrors are loyal to the Imperium, but they are severely and unusually afflicted by the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. Their lack of control has attracted the attention of the Inquisition, the Imperium's powerful internal body tasked with rooting out threats from within, and many Imperial commanders will only accept their aid when left with no other choice. This is because the Flesh Terrors have repeatedly lost themselves to uncontrollable violence even after the enemy has already been destroyed, turning on allies and civilians in the grip of their bloodlust. Thus, they are regarded in the Imperium as terrifying and blood-soaked warriors consumed by violence and suffering. Their uncontrolled savagery has also damaged their standing with their own kin. The Blood Angels and the other chapters of the Sanguinary Brotherhood view the Flesh Terrors as a troubling and shameful reminder of what any of Sanguinius's descendants could become if the genetic curses took full hold of them. This resentment came to a head at a formal gathering known as the Carmine Court, where the Flesh Terrors were put on trial and faced the very real possibility of being officially condemned and destroyed. Their chapter master, Gabriel Seth, stood before Dante, a fellow chapter master, and the other assembled leaders to answer for them. They were ultimately spared through the intervention of a figure named Asterath. As the Black Rage claims more and more of their warriors, their leaders increasingly suspect the Flesh Terrors are on a slow path toward extinction, and no cure has yet been found for them. This has split the chapter in its outlook. Some still place their hope in Gabriel Seth to find a way to save them, while others have accepted that the end is coming and only want to die violently and gloriously before madness takes them completely. Those in the latter camp have embraced the idea of leaving behind a legacy worthy of their founder, driving the chapter to participate in brutal campaigns with extreme and often indiscriminate force, including devastating weapons and merciless purges of worlds deemed disloyal, well beyond what the situation would actually require. The Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are a secret Space Marine chapter with a singular purpose of hunting and destroying demons, the malevolent beings that emerge from the warp, as well as any mortals who draw on the corrupting power of the Chaos Gods. They were created by the Emperor himself with the help of his close advisor Malcador the Sigillite during the Horus Heresy, specifically to serve as humanity's most potent weapon against the threat of chaos. Unlike every other Space Marine chapter whose genetic heritage traces back to one of the Emperor's Primarchs, the Grey Knights carry gene seed derived from the Emperor himself, a blessing known as the Emperor's Gift. It grants them an unusually direct connection to the Emperor's own incorruptible nature, giving them both powerful psychic abilities and an exceptional resistance to the madness and corruption that the warp inflicts on ordinary minds. Every Grey Knight is a psychic warrior, and the combination of their abilities and their flawless genetic heritage makes them uniquely effective against forces that would destroy or corrupt almost anyone else. Their recruitment is handled by ancient and experienced warriors called Gatherers, who travel across the Imperium searching for candidates with rare psychic potential and extraordinary strength of will. Those selected are brought to Titan, one of Saturn's moons, and subjected to a series of punishing trials. Recruits are fitted with explosive collars that trigger if they lose control of their psychic abilities, and are then sent to Titan's most hostile environments to test their endurance, obedience, psychic control, and the will to survive. Fewer than 1 in 1,000 survive even the early stages of these tests. Those who do must then complete a further series of grueling ordeals, including 666 rituals known as the Rites of Detestation, before they can be considered worthy of joining the chapter. Only 1 in a million candidates is said to survive the full initiation. Those who do are subjected to extensive biological modification, psychic surgery, and gene seed implantation. Silver wards are inscribed beneath their skin to protect them from demonic corruption. Their memories, personal identities, and birth names are entirely erased, since demons can exploit knowledge of a person's past to gain power over them. Until a warrior is given a permanent name, he is known only by a number. Each Grey Knight's final name is drawn from arcane knowledge and crafted as a weapon against a specific demon's true name, its fundamental identity within the warp. The end result is not simply a Space Marine, but a being fundamentally remade as a weapon against chaos. The Iron Hands. The Iron Hands are one of the oldest Space Marine chapters in existence, being one of the original legions. Their genetic heritage comes from their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, who was killed during the Horus Heresy, making him a martyred figure central to the chapter's identity. The Iron Hands hold a unique belief that the human body in its natural organic form is inherently weak and prone to failure and corruption. This idea places them philosophically close to the Adeptus Mechanicus, a powerful religious and scientific institution that controls the Imperium's technology and holds its own doctrine that the machine is sacred and superior to the flesh. The death of their Primarch permanently shaped the Iron Hands. Ferrus Manus, during a battle known as the Drop Site Massacre on a world called Istvan V, fell in single combat against a traitor Primarch named Fulgrim, and his body was never recovered. Rather than break under the weight of that loss, the chapter converted its grief into an intense consuming hatred of weakness in all its forms, including the weakness of their own biological bodies. This belief is expressed most literally through the practice of replacing flesh with machinery. Every new recruit undergoes the ritual removal of his left hand as the first step of his induction, a direct echo of Ferrus Manus, whose hands were legendarily made of living metal. As Iron Hands warriors age and advance, many continue replacing more and more of themselves with mechanical parts, to the point where some retain little more than their brain and a handful of vital organs within an otherwise entirely artificial body. To outsiders, their obsession with replacing their own bodies can seem disturbing or even contrary to the values of the Imperium. Regardless, the Iron Hands remain among the most formidable and determined defenders humanity has. Some within the Adeptus Mechanicus suspect their hatred of the flesh may be rooted in a flaw in their gene seed that emerged in the wake of Ferrus Manus' death. There are even rumors that Ferrus Manus himself was aware of this flaw and planned to address it before his death prevented him from doing so. Thousands of years after the Drop Site Massacre, the Iron Hands still carry a bitter resentment toward two fellow chapters, the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, who also fought in the conflict. The Iron Hands believe that Ferrus Manus might have lived if those legions had shown greater strength, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. The Marines Malevolent. The Marines Malevolent are a Space Marine chapter founded sometime during the 32nd millennium. Their genetic origins are unknown. Their armor is primarily sunburst yellow with black covering the power-packed chest guard, torso, and groin, and a silver Imperial eagle on the chest. While their loyalty to the Emperor and their effectiveness in battle are unquestionable, they have earned a deeply troubling reputation even by the standards of other Space Marine chapters. They are notorious for their extreme brutality, their willingness to cause massive collateral damage, and their open indifference to civilian or allied casualties so long as their military objectives are met. This has put them at odds with other Imperial forces, including the Salamanders and the Inquisition, and some Imperial commanders outright refuse to fight alongside them. Their worldview is as harsh as their methods. They hold that innocence does not truly exist, only varying degrees of guilt, and that those unwilling or unable to defend themselves have forfeited their right to survive, on the grounds that their safety was purchased by the sacrifice of others. They also retain an old institutional distrust of all psychic warriors. The Exorcists. The Exorcists were the other Space Marine chapter created during the Dark Founding between the 35th and 36th millennia. Almost everything about them is deliberately obscured. Their true genetic origins are known only to the highest levels of the Ordo Malleus, the branch of the Inquisition dedicated to combating demonic threats, and their founding records have been sealed by order of the Inquisition's own representatives among the Imperium's ruling council, the High Lords of Terra. Their original colors were yellow armor with dark purple and checkered details, but their modern scheme is red power armor with black trim, with white markings used to distinguish veteran warriors. Their chapter badge is a bone-white horned skull set against a red background. It is a deliberate symbol of the suffering and sacrifice that every exorcist must endure before he can be considered a true member of the chapter. The chapter appears to have been created as part of a classified experiment aimed at producing Space Marines with an exceptional resistance to demonic possession and the corrupting influence of chaos. This has led many to conclude that the Exorcists were founded either directly by the Inquisition or at its direction. The process that creates an Exorcist leaves permanent marks on every warrior who survives it. Both their bodies and minds bear the lasting imprint of having been possessed by a demon. Physically, this can manifest in a range of ways: runic scarring, wounds that never fully heal, discolored eyes, scaly patches of skin, or, in some cases, the growth of horns or spines. Mentally, the survivors may carry lingering traits absorbed from their former possessors, including paranoia or episodes of bloodlust. The chapter regards these marks not as shameful but as proof of victory over something profoundly evil. However, they are careful to conceal or address visible physical mutations where possible, since such abnormalities could invite accusations of heresy from other Imperial institutions. The Exorcists broadly follow the standard military structure used by most Space Marine chapters, but their unique and brutal initiation process has forced several significant departures from that norm. Most notably, they maintain 12 companies rather than the standard 10. The additional 2 are composed entirely of scout-level recruits, and they exist out of necessity. The losses during the Exorcist trials are staggering, with roughly 80% of candidates failing to survive. These extra companies help ensure the chapter always has enough potential warriors moving through the process to sustain its numbers. Their knowledge of demonic lore is exceptionally deep, matched only by the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus. They apply this knowledge practically, using forbidden rituals drawn from texts to ward their weapons and equipment against demonic forces. These practices, while effective, make the chapter deeply suspect in the eyes of the Ecclesiarchy, the Imperium's official religious institution, and other chapters with strong anti-psyker or anti-occult traditions, such as the Space Wolves or the Black Templars. Outside of battle, the Exorcists are calm, measured, and honorable. In combat, that composure transforms into a highly aggressive and analytical approach, where their intellect is turned toward rapidly reading the battlefield and applying decisive force. Because every full member of the chapter has been immersed in forbidden knowledge of chaos and the warp, they are unusually resistant to corruption. However, this same familiarity makes them dangerously open to radical solutions, including the use of chaos-tainted weapons or methods against their enemies when they judge it necessary. The Mortifactors. The Mortifactors are a Space Marine chapter who descend from the Ultramarines, created during the Second Founding. The Mortifactors recruit from Possil, a feral world that is also classified as a night world due to how far it sits from its system star, leaving it in perpetual darkness. Its surface is craggy, frigid, and mountainous. The warrior tribes of Possil know neither sunlight nor joy. Their existence is one of unrelenting hardship, constant intertribal warfare, and cannibalistic rituals in an environment that offers nothing but cold and dark. It is from these tribes that the Mortifactors draw their recruits, and the brutal world that produces them goes a long way toward explaining the chapter's fixation on death. The Mortifactors venerate their honored dead to the point of obsession, and their open morbidness and celebration of death unsettles their Imperial allies, particularly those of more superstitious disposition. This grim quality is also not incidental. They treat the dread they inspire as a weapon alongside their conventional arms. In battle, they wear skeletal war paint and hooded robes, and carry power sights inlaid with bones. Recruitment into the Mortifactors is overseen by the chapter's chaplains. Many of these chaplains were once shamans or chieftains among Possil's tribes before being elevated to the chapter. To earn a name within the chapter, each recruit must kill his first enemy and claim their skull. Until that moment, he is called Faceless. Despite their loyalty to the Emperor and their ultramarine lineage, the Mortifactors have deeply fused Imperial faith with the death cults of their homeworld, producing rituals that most of the Imperium would find deeply disturbing. These practices have drawn the attention of the Inquisition, who have viewed the chapter with suspicion in the past. To outside eyes, their behavior edges uncomfortably close to the worship of chaos. The Angels Penitent. The Angels Penitent are a Space Marine chapter that descends from the Blood Angels and was created during the 9th Founding. They were not always called the Angels Penitent. Prior to the arrival of a mysterious figure known only as the Undying Martyr, they bore the name the Angels Resplendent. Where their brother chapters fought for glory, faith, or the thrill of battle, the Angels Resplendent had made nobility their creed, and uniquely among all the scions of Sanguinius, not one of their Space Marines had ever succumbed to the Black Rage. They stood apart from their bloodline's tragedy entirely, unmarked by the madness that defined it. However, one day a mysterious mortal known as the Undying Martyr came before the Angels Resplendent and was interrogated by the chapter's chaplains. He preached a harsh new interpretation of the Imperial Creed, denouncing humanity as irredeemably corrupt and accusing the Adeptus Astartes of complicity in the Imperium's decay. The chaplains were swayed by the preaching of the Undying Martyr. A new and ferocious zeal swept the chapter, and they launched what they call the Great Purge, the elimination of anything deemed blasphemous under their newly puritanical reading of the Imperial Creed. The Angels Resplendent renamed themselves the Angels Penitent, driven by a burning need to atone for humanity's collective sins in the Emperor's sight. Governance of the chapter was passed to the Crown of Thorns, a ruling conclave of chaplains who punished any brother who broke their edicts severely. The transformation brought troubling consequences. The Angels Resplendent had once been celebrated for painting and sculpture, but the Angels Penitent punished any form of artistic expression with execution. More alarming still, the Black Rage began to strike their battle brothers freely enough that the chapter was compelled to raise a death company. Although privately many members of the Angels Penitent desire to return to the ways of the noble artisan, the chapter, now afflicted with the genetic curse of Sanguinius, remains a dogmatic, terrifying cult. The Red Scorpions. The Red Scorpions are a fleet-based Space Marine chapter of unknown origin and uncertain genetic lineage. They are devout believers in the Emperor's divinity and are known for an extreme brand of imperial conservatism and purity that sets them apart from other chapters. What distinguishes them most sharply within the Adeptus Astartes is their absolute adherence to the Codex Astartes. While most chapters interpret or deviate from this text to varying degrees, the Red Scorpions follow every line of it without exception. This is considered remarkable, even by the standards of the Ultramarines, the chapter most closely associated with the Codex and historically regarded as its strictest practitioners. Their armor is charcoal gray, and the chapter's badge is a red scorpion centered on a white field. The Red Scorpion's identity is built entirely around the pursuit of spiritual and physical purity. This obsession with purity results in deep contempt for anyone they consider impure or insufficiently faithful. In their eyes, any sign of contamination, xenos, mutants, heretics, or even abhumans whose genetics have diverged from the baseline through evolution or mutation must be purged. The Red Scorpions extend this distrust to fellow Space Marine chapters whose genetic inheritances cause them to deviate from Codex standards and have on multiple occasions refused to fight alongside Imperial forces they considered a risk to their own orthodoxy. Because the Astra Militarum permits abhumans in its ranks, the Red Scorpions regard it as an inferior and untrustworthy military institution. The Red Scorpions also maintain significantly more apothecaries than most Space Marine chapters. Apothecaries are the medics and biological specialists of a Space Marine force, but among the Red Scorpions, their most sacred function is the constant monitoring of every brother for signs of genetic or biochemical corruption. The Red Scorpion's internal structure is strictly authoritarian. Discipline and obedience are absolute, and those of lower rank are expected to follow the orders of their superiors without question in any situation, whether in combat or outside of it. The chapter also holds strong preferences about how war is waged. They have a deep aversion to covert operations, considering camouflage and infiltration tactics fundamentally dishonorable. Their preference is to meet enemies directly in open battle, and they will resort to stealth methods only when there is no other option. The Nemesis Chapter. The Nemesis Chapter is a Space Marine chapter that traces its origins to the Great Crusade when it existed as the 22nd chapter of the Ultramarines Legion. The Nemesis Chapter's armor is dark green with a yellow aquila displayed on the chest guard. The chapter's badge is a stylized white skull centered on a field of dark green. Before the Ultramarines were united under their Primarch Rabute Guilliman, the 22nd chapter had developed a distinct character, maintaining an unusually large number of Terran-born Space Marines and a heavy concentration of destroyer units, specialists in forbidden and indiscriminate weaponry. When Guilliman took command and restructured the Legion's doctrine around structured adaptability, the 22nd chapter was among a handful of formations that retained their distinct traits. Following the Horus Heresy, Guilliman oversaw the second founding. The 22nd chapter formed the core of the newly constituted Nemesis Chapter, which specialized in exterminatus operations. Exterminatus is the destruction of a planet's entire biosphere and all life on it. Ordered only by the Imperium's highest authorities, it is reserved for situations where a world harbors an extinction-level threat, such as unchecked mutation, disease, or chaos heresy, that could spread to other Imperial worlds and cannot be contained by conventional means. It is a last resort, applied only when retaking or holding a planet is judged to cost more than losing it entirely. Thus, the Nemesis Chapter is the Imperium's executioners of last resort, and they have never flinched from the task. The Minotaurs. The Minotaurs are a Space Marine chapter whose true origins and genetic lineage are unknown. The chapter that bears the name Minotaurs today appears to have little connection to historical accounts of an earlier formation by the same name. Whatever history the Minotaurs had beyond roughly 8,000 years ago has been deliberately hidden, scrubbed or sealed by Imperial edicts powerful enough that even Inquisitors cannot easily bypass them. Imperial commanders regard Minotaur battle brothers as brooding, malignant warriors who radiate barely restrained spite and malice, far from the honorable ideals Space Marines are supposed to embody. Their armor carries rank and battlefield markings that are deliberately difficult for outsiders to interpret. Their armor is bronze, with the right shoulder plate bearing the chapter badge, a red bull's head and black horns on a bronze field, and the left displaying the wearer's battlefield role. Unlike most chapters, the Minotaurs do not mark company or squad numbers on their armor. Veterans of the first company, the chapter's most experienced warriors, are distinguished by a variant badge of a bronze bull's head on dark red. The Minotaurs appear to take their deployment orders almost exclusively from the Senatorum Imperialis, the Imperium's highest governing council, and rarely respond to calls from any other Imperial authority. A notable pattern in their operational history is that they are frequently deployed against other Space Marine forces, such as renegades or isolated factions within otherwise loyal chapters, whose leadership refuses to deal with them internally. The Minotaurs appear to pursue these assignments with enthusiasm, perhaps finding in other Space Marines the most challenging opponents available to them. On the rare occasions when they fight alongside fellow chapters, the Minotaurs make no effort to conceal their contempt, and the resulting friction has escalated to formal duels and open low-level hostility. Their disdain extends to the Imperium's subjects broadly. Even senior Imperial commanders find their presence unsettling. The Minotaurs display fanatical, unquestioning loyalty to the Emperor and to the High Lords of Terra, demonstrated by their participation in the Hexarchy Rebellion on Terra, in which they sided with a reactionary faction of current and former High Lords attempting to reverse the reforms introduced by the resurrected Primarch Rabute Guilliman. Imperial commanders who have served alongside the Minotaurs describe their behavior as bordering on paranoid, noting obsessive security measures taken even against nominal allies, leading some to quietly wonder whether the chapter stands on the edge of madness or even heresy. The Bringers of Judgment. The Bringers of Judgment are a successor to the Dark Angels. Their armor is white with gold, and their leg armor is decorated with golden flames. Their emblem is a black scale on a gold field, representing their self-declared mission to balance the scales of justice and punish those who fall short of the Emperor's standard. They are notorious even among the Unforgiven, the collective name for the Dark Angels and all chapters that descend from them, for the extremity of their zeal. When they encounter rebellion on a world, they hold the entire planetary population responsible. In their judgment, weakness in any one person reflects weakness in all, and the penalty is death. The scale of the atrocities this logic has produced has drawn the attention of the Inquisition, though even that scrutiny has not altered the chapter's behavior. What other lore videos would you like to see? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.